from the gospel according to Matthew chapter 15. I would like to bring your attention back to it, starting with verse 21, and I am also reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Verse 21 says that Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting. She was from that region, and that Tyre and Sidon, that region, first of all, Tyre is rocky. It's a stony terrain, rough, difficult to build, difficult to sustain agriculture, treacherous, increased in danger because of the terrain. And she's from this area, so she's already born into difficulty. Any witnesses? She's already been birthed into a space that is not comfortable or easy or supportive. She's born into struggle. The Sidon meaning fishery, but it also means poor. It was one of the poorest regions. So not only is she in a territory, in a region that is treacherous and rough and rocky, she's also dealing with poverty. She's dealing with lack. And that means that not only is she dealing with lack, but her family has dealt with lack. And she's come from a region that speaks to not enough. And here Jesus decides to go. I like that about him. I like the fact that nothing scares him. I like the fact that God is not threatened by the regions from which we come or by the spaces that we may occupy, either physically, mentally, or emotionally. Tell somebody, God's not threatened. God's not threatened. And she began shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." And of course, we get to understand in terms of the context that because these people were not scientifically or medically advanced, anything that they could not explain, any disorder that they could not explain, they would attribute it to demon possession. So we don't exactly know what was going on with her daughter. She may have had uncontrollable seizures. She may have had MS. She may have had cerebral palsy. She may have had something, though, that they could not explain. And so she says, my daughter is tormented with something that is unexplainable. She is demon possessed. So we see the setup of this woman already. But he did not answer her at all. He did not answer her at all. He did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting at us. She keeps troubling us." In other words, she is out of order. She's out of place. She has overstepped her bounds. So send her away. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came. Tell somebody she kept coming. And knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. Tell somebody she kept coming. Tell someone else she kept allowing herself to be seen. Lord, help me. He answered, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Yes, Jesus actually did say that, according to the text. Let's not sanitize what he said. He said, it is not fair to take the children's bread, the children's food, and throw it to the dogs. She said, yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Don't you appreciate how this woman is her own attorney? Tell somebody she kept coming. She insisted on being seen. She kept coming. Verse 28, then Jesus answered her, woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly. Great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish. Let it be done as you have spoken it. Let it be done as you have pushed through for it. Let it be done. Today I want to talk to you from the message titled, I See You. I see you. This nameless woman from the region of Tyre and Sidon is a Canaanite woman. And for those of you who don't understand the history of the Canaanites, let me fill you in just a little bit. The Canaanites are depicted as the bitter biblical enemies of Israel, whose paganism had often led Israel into idolatry. They were condemned, the Canaanites, and seen as nothing more than burnt offering to be sacrificed in order for the land to be purified. They were stigmatized socially. They were considered sinful people, and they were also considered lesser people. If you study that history between Israel and the Canaanites, you see their many battles. You see their many encounters. They were, as one theologian put it, bitter enemies of Israel. And this woman, then it's easy to note why Jesus would call her a dog, because that's how the Canaanites were seen, as dogs, as lesser, as not enough, as ones who led God's holy people into idol worship, as one who fought against the Holy One of Israel. So they were a marginalized people living on the margins. They remind me of another group of people that I identify with. And as I look around this room, every single person in this room identify with. They remind me of enslaved Africans who were considered a lesser people, who were stigmatized, who were led out of their lands into a foreign land to live as not full human beings, but even to some extent as animals. And even coming out of enslavement, the narrative about African Americans, about black people, perpetuated, and thus we have the rise of Jim Crow. This narrative of trying then to define who this group of people would be. And as one of the great philosophers wrote, that power wills its own knowledge. So those in power were able to use the Bible, science, archaeology, and what other institutional resource they could locate to comprise a narrative as to who black people are and who they would be in America. Yeah, so we were considered a lesser people. And our lot in life was to live on the margins. As your pastor said earlier, let us not think for 1 minute that thought, that idea has been transcended in this nation, because it has not. It still permeates the systems that continue to rule in this nation. It still permeates the minds of unsuspecting children. That they would say, if I were black, I would be picking cotton. But because I am white and privileged, I get to pick you for a prom. It's in the very DNA of this nation, and I would go a little further to say it's in the DNA of this world, because it has not been compartmentalized to the United States of America. And because this nation has been the great melting pot of society and ethnicities and ideas, you have people coming from all across this world with their prejudice, with their racist and bigoted tendencies. And black people got to be the group that would be demonized in this nation. But we understand that it's not just black people that have been stigmatized socially. We also have poor people. We have poor people that now are looked upon as a demonized group in this society, that these poor people are just takers. It's interesting to me how we, even as black people, could be labeled as lazy when we literally built this nation. But because power wills its own knowledge and had the freedom to construct the narratives that is still being held as a sacred canopy over this nation, then the idea that we as black people are lazy has been adopted into the DNA of this nation. So poor people are marginalized, and poor people are stigmatized, and black people are demonized, and black people are considered lesser. Listen, it doesn't matter if you're making $10 million a year. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. As many of our richest black people have found out, when they put on a hoodie and go outside, side. They're still black. And the corrupt imagination that racism has allowed to develop within people. People can't help their imagination. It's been corrupt. They can't help their perception. It's been corrupted by these ideas and concepts and constructs that power has willed in this nation. So this woman's story, this Canaanite woman, this woman's story is our story. She is not foreign to us. We can identify with her. And yet, she decides that she needed to move out of constructs because her life was at risk. She had to move out from the barriers and the obstacles because her life, what she had birthed and produced in the world, was at risk of being extinguished. And I believe that's why our ancestors rose up. I believe that's why they continued to believe a different truth. Because they did not want their lives to be extinguished. We shouldn't be here. No, really, when you think about it, we as a people shouldn't be here. So she came out, the scripture tells us. I'll give you all a minute to only to deal with that because it's distracting. Amen. I get support on every hand. He's been my amen corner. Listen, but I know how our minds are. We're easily distracted. And so she comes out because she's heard about this Jesus. She didn't come out of a bubble. She didn't just show up on the scene. She heard about this Jesus. She heard about this life giver. She heard about this miracle worker. And someone who was not afraid of connecting with people on the margins of life. And so she heard, and she left her home with an intention. Before I leave this man, my daughter is going to be well. Now, how can I be so confident of her intention? I could be confident of her intentions because of her responses to Spirit, her responses to Jesus. She didn't know what she was going to encounter, but her intention was, before I leave him, I'm going to get what I came here to get. You know, most people go through a lifetime giving away their authority to name themselves. This woman, when we study the biblical narrative, we realize that all they needed to know, those in the context of that time, was that she was a Canaanite woman. They didn't know anything about this woman as a person. All they needed to know was that she was a Canaanite woman, and because she was a Canaanite woman, she was lesser, she was not deserving, she was not worthy, she should not even be in the presence of Jesus, because she was already identified by the communities and people around her. And most people go through a lifetime giving away their authority to name themselves. Slowly but surely, we keep giving other entities permission to determine how and who we will be in the world. And that's what power wants to do. Power is one of the entities that wants to determine how and who we will be in the world. And it's so interesting to me how we allow ourselves to give away the authority that God has placed within us. And one of the things that I realize that we must do is that we must move from being compliant to those entities. We must move from being compliant to being defiant. What does it mean to be defiant? Stay with me this morning. To be defiant means that we are courageously and radically challenging and denying what has been ascribed to us. Let me say that again. We must move from being compliant to being defiant. Tell somebody, I'm defiant. Yeah. And to be defiant means that you're courageously and radically challenging and denying what has been ascribed to you. We must deny and reject the false identities that are endeavoring to be placed upon us. We must radically deny and reject the false identity this power has sought to put on us as black people, as women, as black men, as poor people, as marginalized people, as successful people, but not successful in the right way. Oh, come on now. If not, we will establish a relationship by psychological identification. In other words, we will become and we will align with the identity that has been asserted about us and ascribed to us. Psychological identification. This woman had all of this stuff going on before she came to Jesus. She understood who she was. She understood that she was a Canaanite woman. She understood how she would be perceived. First of all, let's start with the fact that she was a Canaanite. Unclean, impure, sinful, less than, not worthy. Come on, you fill in the blanks for your own self. And she was a woman. Showing up in a space filled with men, not knowing what she would encounter, but already understanding the set objections that were already in place. She knew it. She already knew it. And she kept coming. Tell somebody she kept coming. She knew it, and she kept coming. See, we have a relationship with by psychological identification. Every story, every event, every interaction will affirm that identity for you. So every time you have an experience, it goes back to, oh, that's true. I really am that. Every time two people could be in the same room, and someone can say something to those two people, and based on their psychological identification, one person will hear it one way, and someone else will hear it another way. You say you look fat in that dress. One person would say, yes, I do. P-H-A-T. And then the other person would be like, yeah, I'm just big. I've been struggling with this since I was 5. When everybody sees me, that's what they see. I haven't been able to make any strides with this. How can I think that I can even get to where I've been dreaming of when I'm just fat? And I use that example because that's an easy one. That's an easy one, but we've got fat and fat on many levels. And because of our psychological identification, when we hear something, every experience, every encounter, every event, everything that comes to us will go through that vortex. And as it's going through the vortex, it makes an identification before it lands. And that's why it could land one way, the fat way, for one, and the fat way for another. This woman already understood how she would be perceived as a Canaanite, as a dog. You think she was surprised by Jesus saying, you're a dog? She grew up hearing that stuff. Oh, yeah. She grew up hearing that. How many of you can say, I've grown up hearing some stuff? But she kept coming. You see, you've got to understand that the identity you sanction is the identity you serve. Let me say that again. The identity you sanction is the identity you will serve. In other words, if you allow it to name you, it controls you. That's why I said we shouldn't even be here. Because we as a people, given what has been said to us, given the identity that has been endeavoring to be placed upon us for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, we should not even be here as a people. But we refuse to sanction it. Because if you sanction it, if you sanction an identity, you're going to serve it. What does that mean then? That means that you must engage on a level with God that reveals to you your true identity. And you must engage that in consciousness, in your awakeness. Because consciousness precedes form. Consciousness precedes form. You cannot be anything that you are not first willing to become in consciousness. You cannot have anything that you're not first willing to become in consciousness. Consciousness precedes form. It's not the other way around. So when you see a form of yourself showing up that does not align with the truth about you, you've got to ask yourself, what have I taken on in consciousness about myself? Because what's being formed doesn't speak to who I am. So somewhere there's a disconnect. So when the form shows up, don't get stuck on the form. Ask yourself, what have I accepted in consciousness? Because when you raise your level of consciousness to the truth about you, form of that truth will be inevitable. Tell somebody she kept coming. She kept coming. See, a false identity gets you out of tune. It's like turning on the radio and hearing that yes, God is. That false identity and consciousness keeps you out of tune. That false identity downsizes your personhood. And you begin to live the results of other people's thinking. They were saying, Jesus, send her away. Send her away. And she could have taken on their thinking. I don't deserve to be here. I'm not going to get what I came here to get. I'm a Canaanite woman. Nothing's ever going to change. It's been like this for hundreds of years. Come on now. The stories that reinforces our psychological identification, and she could have rehearsed them to herself and fall right in line with the thinking of those around her, the thinking of the disciples that were saying, send her away. She doesn't deserve to be here. She's disturbing us. She's out of order. Even our dear Jesus, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Objection number one. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. People, institutions, power want to tell you what they think or believe about you. But there's a different declaration. It's the declaration about what God knows about you. Now it's great, Pastor, it's great that God knows. I love the fact that God knows. And because he's never changing, unchanging, right? The same yesterday, today, and forever. I'm glad that he'll always know the truth about me. But it's not sufficient for God to know. Oh, I know I scared some of you when I talked about our unhealthy God dependence. But this is exactly what I'm talking about right here. Where God doesn't want to show up for you, God wants to show up through you. And when God is working through you, whenever you get to the end of you, that's when God is like, okay, I take it from here. I take it from here. But the relationship is God working through you. So it's great that God knows you. And it's great that God knows you from your beginning to your ending. It's great that God knows every strand of hair that is on your head. It's great that God knows all the good plans that God has for you. But none of that materializes until you know. Listen. Listen. You can't show what you don't know. Oh. You can't show what you don't know. If you cut open an orange right now and squeeze it, you're not going to get apple juice out of it. You're going to get orange juice out of it. You can't show what you don't know, and you can't give what you don't have. Form precedes consciousness. Consciousness precedes form. When you are there, when you know the truth in consciousness. So I love the fact that God knows. Therefore, I don't have to convince God. I don't ever have to go to prayer to try to convince God. God already knows. And God now waits on us to get there in consciousness for us to know. Tell somebody she kept coming. She kept coming. Jesus said, first objection, I wasn't sent here for you. I wasn't sent here for you. You know, I understand, because we all have stories. I understand that something may put you there, but it doesn't have the power to keep you there. This woman didn't have a say in the fact that she showed up as a Canaanite woman in a patriarchal society where women's lives were only for procreation. She showed up in that space and time. And she showed up in a treacherous place. And she showed up in poverty. No husband mentioned. Did he die? Was she raped? We don't know. We just know it was just her. And the only thing that she had given life to was about to be extinguished. And she had to reconcile this identity that's upon her and contrast it to what she saw for herself. I love this woman. Because even you think in the story she's kind of agreeing with him. It's like the attorneys in the courtroom. Like, yeah, you said that, but let me raise this. You know, that's how it is. It's not like I understand the conditions. I understand the history, but let me raise this. It was when they argued Brown versus Board of Education. Yes, we understand what the history is. We understand how people thought and why segregation within our schools should continue. We get that. Yeah, and yet, Your Honor, we need you to consider something else. He said, I wasn't come. Yet she persisted. She kept coming. And then he said something that I really do believe she was anticipating, because she was answer ready. You know why she was answer ready? She was already there in consciousness. She had already intentioned. It doesn't matter what they throw at me. It doesn't matter what they try to remind me of. And that's how your mind will work. As thought visitors come to you, visiting your mind, trying to remind you where you come from, how many times you failed, how many mistakes you made, how dark your skin is, what you didn't achieve, how uneducated you might be, how educated you might be. Come on now. How you failed at that business the first time around, the second, the third time. How we're so small here at Union. We're a smaller congregation. What kind of impact can we make? You can make an impact to totally change not only Montclair, but the nation. And you've got a pastor that's willing to take you there. But if you're stuck in an identity that doesn't align with vision, I don't know why God is leading me down this path, but if you're stuck with an identity that no longer harmonizes, and you're calcified, and there's no room for shift shifting and changing and expanding, you'll continue to have what you've always had. And I know it's good, but at some point, God wants to take you to great. I'm sorry, Pastor, if I'm overstepping my bounds. But there's got to be a rebellion on the inside of you. And I believe this Canaanite woman, God bless her, like our ancestors, was a rebel. Rebellion is not about the crowd. Rebellion is about individual action. It has to do with changing your consciousness and breaking your silence. So many people are sitting with identities that don't harmonize with who they are because they're not rebelling. They're sitting in silence. The philosopher Epictetus wrote, yes, you are primary existence. You are a distinct portion of the essence of God and contain a part of God in yourself. Why then are you ignorant of your noble birth? You carry God about within you and know nothing of it. The life of God in you is a direct objection to what keeps us on lower planes of identity. It's a direct objection. Jesus said, so objection number one, I wasn't sent here for you. And he said, only the lost sheep of Israel. And she kept coming. I'm winding down. He said, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Not even give it. Throw it. Jesus. Knowing what we know about Jesus, knowing how Jesus encountered people to always bring them to a higher place of consciousness about themselves, we cannot infer from this passage that Jesus was endeavoring to get this woman to walk away empty-handed. We cannot infer that Jesus was saying, because you're a dog, you can't get this. He raised to her an argument of power that was existing. And Jesus was like, let me see if you really want this. Let me see just how conscious you've become of yourself. So Jesus laid out for her an objection that she has heard all her life. Sometimes God is just trying to help us deal with the stuff. We curse it. We curse certain experiences that bring the stuff to the surface. But it's God's mercy that wants to bring it to us. You can't change what you don't know. So God, Jesus, truth is speaking. Says, it's not fair to take this and throw it to dogs. Now, Jesus never once said, you're a dog. Again, our analogy, two people in the room. hearing the same thing. How are you going to receive it? This woman was answer ready. She said, oh, I hear you. Because I've heard that before. Oh, y'all should be like, really like, She said, yeah, I hear you. I've heard that before. How many of you have heard that before? How many of you women, especially as you are navigating this weekend and doing your digging and going deeper, that there were mind visitors trying to tell you some stuff that you've heard before? And she said, yeah, it's not fair to give it to dogs. Now the question becomes, how are you hearing it? Where have you identified? And where is this thought, this idea going to land in you? And therefore, the way it lands is going to determine how you're going to respond. How you receive it determines how you respond to it. She says, But there's something about dogs that I know. Dogs are really resilient, Jesus. I don't know if you know that about him, about them, but dogs have a way of taking nothing and making something. I don't know if you know this, but dogs have a way of taking what looks minuscule and feeding their entire family of puppies. I don't know if you understand that about dogs. So now she's introducing a whole other idea of how dogs should be looked at. She said dogs know what to do when the bread's on the ground. I like that. Dogs know what to do. They have the capacity to know what to do. Now, if dogs can do that, certainly I know how to deal with this moment. Oh, yes. If dogs can do that, certainly I know what to deal, how to handle even the little opening that I've created over this weekend to make it produce for me the life that I want. How many of you have been involved in the opening? How many of you have been doing some digging, creating the opening? I know what's been said about me. I know how many times I've been here, but I've been doing some digging, and the little opening that I have is going to allow the river of life that's within me to come forth. She said, Jesus, you don't know it, but you've got a case of mistaken identity. You're mistaking me. You're mistaking me for another Canaanite woman. You're mistaking me for somebody else. And when she said that, finally, her release came. She tapped water. Tell somebody I'm tapping water. I'm tapping water. I'm tapping water. And finally, she got heaven to respond to her. Jesus said, I see you, girl. Jesus said, I see you. You can't be seen unless you allow yourself to be seen. The miracle was of her making because she kept coming and allowed herself to be seen. And Jesus finally said, I see you. And that's what the world is going to say about you. I see you. That's what the universe is going to say. I see you. That's what heaven is going to say. Oh, I see you. I see you. You're ready for the next level. Here you go. I see you. You're ready to take on this spring of living water. Here you go. I see you. Tell your sister, say, I see you. I see you. I see you. But listen, they're not trying to convince you. They're simply agreeing with you. See, this woman didn't need Jesus to convince her. She just needed Jesus to come on board. Y'all got to hear me now. She kept coming until Jesus came on board. What the? You mean I only came? I'm sorry, Pastor. I only came for the lost sheep. And now you're getting me to step across my own line? Oh, I'm talking about a Canaanite woman. Yes, yes, yes. Dirty, messy, but not messed up. Caught in a mess, but not messed up. Jesus over here. She's on the other side. She's not moving. I know that's probably not proper English, but she's not moving. She's on the other side already. She's already there in consciousness. And all the experience is endeavoring to do is to say, let me see if you're really there. Let me see if that's really what you believe about you. Because if you know it, you're going to show it. A little song we used to sing, if you're happy and you know, right? She's here, and the line is drawn. And she doesn't move. She gets heaven to move. Oh! If I had some women and men in this house who is agreeing with who God says that they are. Because God already saw that in her. God wanted to make sure she saw it in herself. God says, oh, here I am. And how do we know this? Because Jesus didn't say, my faith is going to heal your daughter. Jesus said, your faith. Can I offer you a different definition of faith? I know you already know the one in the Bible, so that's good. And I'm just going to tweak it just a little bit. See, faith is a mental idea. It's a mental attitude. So convinced of its own idea that any contradiction is impossible and unthinkable. Let me say that again. Faith is a mental attitude that shows up being so convinced of this idea that any contradiction is impossible and unthinkable. Faith. You held on to that idea, woman. You held on to a different identity, woman. And your life is going to be lived fully. In that moment, her faith got Jesus to cross boundaries for her. Tell somebody, I see you. I see you. I'm a witness to who you are. I see you. I'm closing. Listen. This woman and her offspring are now free to experience life anew. Socially, culturally, relationally, Jesus didn't just cross boundaries in terms of healing her daughter. Jesus crossed the boundaries in front of his disciples, in front of these Jewish people who were watching him, to say, this woman is being invited in. No longer an outcast. I am no longer only. So in that moment, not only does she create a new reality for her life, not only does she create a new reality for her life, she creates a new social, relational, economical reality for the whole Canaanite people. I'm bringing them in. I'm crossing boundaries for you, but not just for you. Everything attached to you. Me and my house. Everything that extends from you is now brought in to life anew. Now that she didn't know. She thought she was just coming there for herself. But when you show up in your true identity, when you show up as the master that you are, when you show up as the power that you are, you transcend not just for yourself, but for those connected to you. I see you. I see you. I see you. When you wake up in the mornings, you got to look at yourself. Say, I see you. I see you. Y'all remember the movie, and I'm closing with this. Y'all remember the movie Dirty Dancing? Let me see by hands who've seen that movie. I know it's old. Okay, the majority of you have seen that movie. One of my favorite movies, Dirty Dancing. And y'all remember the end of the movie when they were doing their final dance? And Patrick Swayze walks in, all ready to go, looking good. He walks in. We need to have a Dirty Dancing with the all-black cast. I wouldn't mind Chadwick Boseman playing. Anyway, and he walks in, and he went right to where baby was sitting. He takes her by the hand. Y'all remember what he said? Nobody puts baby in a corner. And when Jesus told that woman, I see you, what he was telling her is no longer are you going to allow anybody to put you in a corner. And when you make the decision to be seen, when you make the decision in consciousness to be seen, your life song will sing. You will no longer be blind, but you will have vision. When you make the shift in consciousness, you will no longer be living through life comatose, in a spiritually comatose condition, but you will be alive with the spring of God springing up from within you. I see you. And every day, God looks at you and says, I see you. I see you. I'm not judging you. I see you. And I keep calling you to places for you to see yourself. I see you. When that happens, your life song will sing. When that happens, your life song will sing. If you can, stay standing. We're going to enter into a time of affirming what we've received in this moment. I see you. My life song will sing. because I refuse to die with my life still in me.
Right. Yes.
My life song sings. Sister Carla.